My name is Tessa, and I'm 33 years old. I never thought an old ring from my grandmother would turn my life upside down. When I was a child, my grandmother used to tell me stories about how every family heirloom carries a soul, a piece of its owner that never fades. Back then, I'd laugh and roll my eyes. But when she passed away, she left me one thing: an old, worn-out ring that didn't seem like much. A faded gold band with a pale blue stone that caught the light in a strange way. It wasn't shiny or elegant. It looked like something out of a forgotten jewelry box from another time. Still, it was hers, and that made it precious to me. I've worn it every single day since the funeral, no matter what anyone said. The problem was, everyone had something to say about it. I worked as a librarian at Oak Ridge Middle School, a small-town school where gossip traveled faster than the morning announcements. My coworkers weren't cruel people, but they had a habit of finding amusement in small things like my outdated clothes, my quiet nature, and most of all, that ring. During lunch breaks, I'd sit at the round table near the window while they compared their latest jewelry hauls. Melissa would flaunt her diamond bracelet, and Cara would brag about her husband's anniversary gift, a glittering sapphire necklace. Then, without fail, one of them would glance at my hand and smirk. "Still wearing Grandma's toy ring, Tessa?" they'd say, giggling. You know, vintage doesn't always mean valuable. I'd smile weakly and try to change the subject, pretending their words didn't sting. But they did. Damon, my fiancé, wasn't much better. When we first started dating, he said he loved my down-to-earth nature. I believed him. But as our relationship went on, I realized what he really meant was that he thought I was simple and easy to control. He came from a wealthier family, and as our wedding planning began, I could feel the gap between us widening. He'd comment on my clothes, my car, and lately, my ring. "I can't believe you still wear that thing," he told me one night as we were getting ready for a dinner with his parents. "It's embarrassing, Tessa. People might think we can't afford a proper ring." I looked down at it, tracing the faint engraving on the inside of the band. "It was my grandmother's," I said softly. "It's special to me," he scoffed. "Special doesn't mean suitable. You'll have a real diamond soon anyway. Maybe it's time you stopped clinging to sentimental junk." Those words pierced through me more than I wanted to admit. I should have stood up for myself, but instead, I stayed quiet. Maybe part of me was afraid he was right that the ring wasn't worth anything. But even then, taking it off felt like losing a part of my grandmother all over again. The final straw came a few weeks later, during dinner at Damon's parents' mansion. His mother, the kind of woman who wore pearls even when gardening, noticed the ring immediately. "Oh, sweetheart," she said with a laugh. "Is that from one of those antique fairs? How quaint." Damon's father chuckled. "Looks like something out of a cereal box," he added. Everyone laughed, except me. I forced a smile, blinking back tears. I could feel Damon's hand tighten around mine under the table, a silent warning not to make a scene. After dinner, I slipped into the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My eyes looked tired, my cheeks burned with humiliation. I turned the ring slowly, studying the stone. It wasn't flashy. It didn't sparkle under the harsh bathroom light. But somehow, I couldn't look away from it. It had a calm beauty, a quiet strength that I couldn't explain. I remembered my grandmother's voice, soft but firm, as she pressed it into my palm the day she died. "This ring will protect you one day, Tessa. Don't ever lose it." At the time, I thought she meant it in an emotional way, a sentimental promise of comfort. But that night, standing in that marble bathroom surrounded by people who only valued what glittered, I realized something: I wasn't protecting the ring. The ring was protecting me. It was the last piece of someone who loved me for who I was, not for what I had. When I walked back out, Damon looked annoyed. He whispered under his breath, "Try not to look so moody. You're making my parents uncomfortable." I nodded and smiled politely through the rest of the evening, but something inside me had shifted. On the way home, as Damon drove and complained about how his mother only meant well, I stared out the window, replaying the laughter in my mind. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how tired I was of being belittled for something so personal. The ring wasn't ugly, it was misunderstood. And maybe, so was I. When we got home, I placed the ring on my nightstand for the first time in years. I lay awake, staring at it, the faint glow of the streetlight reflecting off the pale stone. I thought about my grandmother, about how much she loved me, about how she never cared about appearances. That night, I made a promise to myself. I was done letting people mock what they didn't understand. The next morning, when Damon's mother called to suggest a jeweler for a proper engagement ring, I smiled to myself and decided to do something that would prove them all wrong. I thought I loved Damon, but that night, he made me question everything. The morning after that awful dinner, Damon barely spoke to me. He sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, sipping his coffee like nothing had happened. When I asked if everything was okay, he sighed dramatically and said, "You really embarrassed me last night, Tessa." I blinked in confusion. "Embarrassed you? What did I do?" "You know what I mean," he said, setting down his cup. "You sat there looking all hurt when my mother made a harmless joke. You made things awkward. And honestly, that ring didn't help. It makes people talk. People talk." That phrase stuck in my head like a splinter. Damon always cared too much about what people thought: his image, his friends, his reputation. But I never imagined he'd choose that over me. I tried to stay calm. "It's just a ring, Damon. My grandmother's ring. I don't understand why it bothers you so much." He gave me a sharp look. "Because it's cheap, Tessa. It looks cheap. Do you know how that reflects on me? I'm an executive now. I can't have my fiancé walking around wearing a trinket that looks like it came from a pawn shop." I froze, my heart pounding. I'd always known he could be shallow. But hearing it out loud hit differently. "So, you're embarrassed by me?" I asked quietly. Damon rubbed his temples, frustrated. "No, I'm embarrassed by your choices. You're marrying into a family that takes appearance seriously. My parents are already questioning if you fit in, and honestly, you don't help when you cling to things like that ring. It's time you started acting like someone who belongs in my world." His words were like a slap. I felt myself shrinking, my voice trembling as I whispered, "It's all I have left of her." He leaned back in his chair and smirked. "Then maybe you should keep it in a drawer where it belongs. Wear something appropriate when you're with me. I'll buy you a new ring, something real. You can call it a symbol of moving forward." I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. Moving forward? As if love meant erasing the people who came before him. As if my grandmother's memory was disposable. That day, I went to work with my chest heavy and my mind spinning. Every time I glanced at my hand, I remembered his words: cheap, embarrassing, doesn't belong. My coworkers noticed something was off, but I didn't have the strength to talk about it. During lunch, I sat quietly in the library office, scrolling through my grandmother's old photos on my phone. In every single one, she wore that ring. It glowed softly in the black and white images, as if it carried its own light. I felt guilty for even thinking about taking it off. When I got home that evening, Damon was already dressed in a suit. He looked perfect, as always, polished, confident, untouchable. "We're going to my company's gala next week," he said casually. "You'll need a new dress, and I'll be taking you to a jeweler tomorrow. We're getting you something more presentable." I hesitated. "Damon, I don't want a new ring." He narrowed his eyes. "It's not a request, Tessa. It's for both of us. I don't want whispers at my workplace about my fiancé's outdated jewelry." "Whispers?" I repeated, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "Since when do you care more about strangers' opinions than my feelings?" He laughed coldly. "You're being dramatic. It's just a piece of metal. Take it off for one night. If it means that much to you, wear it at home. But I won't have you embarrassing me in front of my colleagues." That was the moment I realized something I'd been too afraid to admit: Damon didn't love me. He loved what I represented. A quiet, compliant woman who wouldn't challenge him. The ring wasn't the problem. It was a symptom of a bigger truth. He wanted to erase the parts of me that didn't fit his image. That night, I sat in bed staring at the ring again, feeling the weight of it more than ever. I whispered to the empty room, "Grandma, what should I do?" "Of course. There was no answer. Only silence. But deep down, I knew she would have told me to stand my ground. She always said, never trade your memories for someone else's approval. When I met my best friend Mariah for coffee the next day, she noticed immediately that I looked upset. "What happened now?" she asked. Concern etched across her face. I told her everything, Damon's words, his ultimatum, his obsession with appearances. Mariah shook her head in disbelief. "Tessa, that's not love. That's control. You're too good for that man." I laughed bitterly. I don't even know what to do anymore. He's making me feel like I'm crazy for caring about a stupid ring. "It's not stupid," she said firmly. "If it's important to you, that's all that matters. But maybe you should find out why it's important. You said your grandmother was mysterious about it, right? Why not get it appraised?" "Just for curiosity's sake," I blinked. "Appraised?" "Yeah," she said. "You don't have to sell it. Just find out what it's worth or what story it holds. It might make you appreciate it even more." At first, I hesitated. I didn't care about the monetary value. But the thought of uncovering the ring's story, the history behind it, sparked something inside me. Maybe Mariah was right. Maybe understanding where it came from would give me strength to face what lay ahead. I smiled faintly. "You know what? I think I will." That night, when Damon came home and started talking about tuxedo fittings and floral arrangements, I nodded and pretended to listen. But in my heart, I had already made a different plan, one he didn't need to know about. The next morning, I searched for a local appraiser and unknowingly set in motion the moment that would change my entire life. I walked into the antique shop expecting confirmation that the ring was worthless. It was a gray Thursday afternoon when I decided to visit the antique jewelry shop. The sky looked heavy, like it might rain, and I remember thinking how perfectly that matched my mood. I didn't expect anything grand to come from it. In fact, part of me was ready to hear that the ring was worth nothing more than its sentimental value, that maybe Damon was right. But I needed closure. I needed to know for myself. The shop sat at the corner of Pine and Alder, a quiet part of town most people forgot about. Its faded sign read Lenhart & Co. Antiques. Since 1954. The windows were dusty, and the door chimed softly when I stepped inside. The scent hit me first, a blend of old wood, leather, and polish. Inside, time seemed to move differently. Rows of glass cases displayed brooches, lockets, and watches, each one carrying a whisper of the past. Behind the counter stood an elderly man with kind eyes and neatly combed silver hair. His name tag read Mr. Lenhart. He looked up from his magnifier and smiled. "Good afternoon, miss. Looking for something special?" I hesitated before approaching. "Actually, I was hoping you could take a look at something for me." "Of course," he said warmly. "What do you have there?" I slipped the ring off my finger and placed it gently on the velvet mat. For the first time in years, my hand felt strangely bare. "Mr. Lenhart picked up the ring carefully, his eyes narrowing in curiosity. "It's been in my family for generations," I explained nervously. "I don't think it's worth much, but I was hoping to learn a little more about it." He nodded, already examining it under the magnifying lamp. Interesting piece," he murmured. "May I?" "Please," I said. The seconds ticked by as he rotated the ring under the light, adjusted his magnifier, and even took out a small notebook to jot something down. I could tell immediately that something about it intrigued him. His expression changed, his eyes sharpened, his movements grew slower and more deliberate. "Where did you say this came from?" he asked quietly. "My grandmother," I replied. "It was hers for as long as I can remember. She passed it down to me before she died." He didn't respond. Instead, he removed his glasses and said, "Excuse me for a moment, I'd like to look at this." Under a stronger scope in the back. My heart fluttered nervously. "Oh, sure," I said, though I couldn't hide the unease in my voice. As he disappeared through a curtain behind the counter, I glanced around the shop, trying to distract myself. There were pocket watches ticking softly, porcelain figurines, and faded photographs of couples from decades ago. Everything in that room carried history and secrets. Minutes passed, 5, then 10. My anxiety grew heavier with each one. What was taking him so long? I started to wonder if I'd made a mistake. What if he'd found something wrong with it? Or worse, what if it was fake? Finally, the curtain rustled, and Mr. Lenhart returned, holding the ring delicately in both hands. But his face was different now. The warmth was gone, replaced by something unreadable caution, maybe even shock. "Miss," he began slowly, "are you absolutely certain your grandmother never told you where she got this?" My pulse quickened. She just said it had been in our family for generations. Why? Is something wrong? He took a deep breath and set the ring back on the counter between us. "I've been doing this for 50 years, he said quietly, "and I've never seen craftsmanship quite like this. The metalwork, the engraving, and this stone, it's not what it appears to be." I frowned, leaning in. "What do you mean?" "That's no glass or synthetic gem," he said, his voice low. "It's a natural sapphire. But not just any sapphire. It's an exceptionally rare cut. The kind used in royal commissions from the late 1700s. I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. "Royal commissions? Yes," he continued, tapping gently on the band with a gloved finger. "And the mark inside, it's almost worn away, but I can still make out part of the insignia. This appears to be linked to the Duchy of Amara. The name meant nothing to me. I don't understand." He reached under the counter and pulled out a thick reference book, flipping through its pages until he found a drawing that made my breath catch. It was a painting, an old portrait of a regal woman with soft features, wearing an elaborate dress and a ring identical to mine. The caption read, "Duchess Amara of Vensaria. 1782. My voice came out as a whisper. "That can't be real." He looked at me gravely. "Miss, this ring hasn't been seen publicly for over 2 centuries. Historians believed it was lost during the fall of the duchy. If this is authentic, and I believe it is, you're holding something of immense historical and monetary value." I felt dizzy, like the air had suddenly become too thin. I looked at the ring, the same ring everyone mocked, and it seemed to glow under the shop's dim light. "That can't be right," I stammered. "My grandmother lived her whole life here in this town. She never even traveled abroad. Then she must have had a remarkable story," he said softly. "One worth uncovering. But you need to be careful. Something like this attracts attention, the wrong kind of attention." His tone sent chills down my spine. I nodded weakly, clutching the ring as if someone might snatch it from me right then. "What should I do?" I asked. "Keep it safe," he said firmly. "Don't show it to anyone. Don't mention its value until we can verify everything properly. I'll start research on provenance records, but for now, treat this like a secret." I thanked him, though my mind was spinning too fast to process anything. As I stepped outside, the cool air hit my face, grounding me for a moment. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. The world around me felt different, as if I'd crossed into another life without realizing it. That's when I noticed him, a man in a gray coat standing across the street, watching me. He wasn't pretending to look at his phone or a shop window. His eyes were fixed, directly on me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, as I turned to walk quickly toward my car, he started following at a distance. I clutched my grandmother's ring tightly in my hand, my heart pounding with a single terrifying thought: someone else knew what it was. "That's not just a ring, it's a royal heirloom." Those words kept echoing in my head all night. Long after I'd left Mr. Lenhart's antique shop, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the painting of the Duchess with my ring gleaming on her finger. I could still hear Mr. Lenhart's voice, steady, careful, almost reverent, as he explained what it might mean. It didn't feel real. How could something so priceless have ended up in my grandmother's hands, and then mine? The next morning, I went back to the shop, still shaken. Mr. Lenhart was already there, flipping through old leather-bound ledgers when I walked in. He looked up, his expression serious but kind. "Miss Tessa," he said, "I didn't expect you so soon." "I couldn't stop thinking about it," I admitted, placing the ring on the counter. You said it could be worth millions. I need to understand how that's even possible. My grandmother lived her whole life in a tiny farmhouse outside of town. She wasn't rich, she wasn't titled, she was just her. He nodded slowly. Sometimes history takes strange paths. Let's start from what we know. He put on his glasses again and gestured for me to sit. This ring's craftsmanship is undeniably royal, specifically late 18th century European. The stone's cut is an old mine style that was exclusive to aristocratic families. And this engraving here, he tilted it under the light, isn't decorative. It's a crest. The symbol of the Duchy of Amara. I leaned forward. You're certain? Beyond any doubt, he said. This ring was part of the Duchess's personal collection. When the duchy fell during the wars, her estate was looted and most of her jewelry disappeared. Historians have speculated for years about where it went. I felt my pulse quicken. So, you're saying this ring could be stolen? He raised a hand gently. Not necessarily. Many pieces were taken, sold, or passed down quietly through generations. If your grandmother owned this, it's likely it found its way into your family long ago. The question is how. I thought back to the few things my grandmother had ever told me about her past. She'd mentioned growing up in Europe, but she rarely shared details. She came to the US. After the war, met my grandfather, and built a quiet life. She never spoke of relatives, and her accent, though faint, had always intrigued me. She once said she left behind a life that wasn't meant for her, I murmured. I always thought it was just a poetic way of saying she started over. Mr. Lenhart smiled faintly. Perhaps it was more literal than you realized. He opened a drawer and pulled out a sealed folder. I took the liberty of consulting a few archives last night. There are references to the Duchess's granddaughter, Amara's only surviving descendant who vanished after the war. Some believe she fled under a different name. My stomach dropped. You think my grandmother was... He didn't finish the sentence for me. He didn't need to. I stared at the ring, the same dull, unassuming band everyone mocked. And suddenly, it wasn't dull at all, it was glowing under the morning light, as if awakened by truth. I shook my head. This is insane. My grandmother was a librarian, just like me. She baked cookies on Sundays and fed stray cats. She wasn't royalty. Mr. Lenhart chuckled softly. Sometimes history hides in plain sight. Not all queens wear crowns, Miss Tessa. I laughed nervously, unsure whether to feel honored or terrified. If this is all true, what am I supposed to do? I can't keep something this valuable. His expression grew grave. For now, you must keep it hidden. Do not tell anyone, not your friends, not your fiancé. Word of something like this spreads fast. There are collectors, smugglers, even families who might claim it's theirs. Until I can authenticate its full provenance, it's safer if no one knows. I nodded, my hands trembling as I took the ring back. I understand. As I turned to leave, he added, and Miss Tessa, be careful who you trust. Things like this have a way of attracting attention. Outside, the sun was blinding after the dim shop interior. I clutched the ring in my fist and looked around. The street was quiet. Almost eerily so. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I scanned the nearby cars, the shop windows, even the alley across the road, but there was no one there. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the weight of what I'd just learned was getting to me. On the drive home, I kept replaying everything in my mind. My grandmother's cryptic words. This ring will protect you one day. Mr. Lenhart's warning. The man in the gray coat I'd seen yesterday. It all seemed to form a pattern, though I couldn't quite piece it together. When I pulled into my apartment complex, I checked the rearview mirror one last time before getting out. That's when I saw it, a silver sedan parked a few spaces down, engine running, with a man inside. I couldn't make out his face, but I recognized the coat, gray. My heart started to race. I walked briskly toward my building, pretending not to notice, but I could feel his gaze following me the whole way. My hands shook as I unlocked my door and slammed it shut behind me. I stood there for a full minute, listening to the sound of my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I told myself it was nothing, just coincidence. But when I finally looked out my window, the car was still there. The driver was still inside, unmoving, watching. I backed away from the glass, clutching the ring so tightly it dug into my palm. I didn't know what he wanted or how he knew, but I suddenly understood what Mr. Lenhart had meant. Someone else knew about the ring. And now, they knew about me. From that moment, I knew someone else knew about the ring. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside my apartment made my heart jump. The faint hum of passing cars, the creak of the hallway floorboards, all of it made me think of the man in the gray coat. I kept the ring in its velvet box on my bedside table, half tempted to hide it somewhere, half afraid to take my eyes off it. Around 3 a.m. I finally drifted into a restless sleep, only to wake up from a dream of my grandmother whispering, "Keep it safe, Tessa. They're looking for it." The next morning, I told myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe the man wasn't even watching me. Maybe he just happened to be parked nearby. But the unease stayed with me, clinging to my chest like fog. When I left for work, I caught myself glancing over my shoulder, scanning every parked car, every face that looked vaguely familiar. At the library, things felt strangely off. My coworkers were their usual chatty selves, but I couldn't focus. My hands shook as I sorted books, my mind looping through worst-case scenarios. By lunch, I gave up pretending and stepped outside to call Mariah. She answered on the first ring. "Tessa, you sound weird. What's wrong?" I took a shaky breath. "Remember that man I told you about, the one who followed me after I left the antique shop? I think he was outside my apartment last night. I saw him again this morning, parked down the street." There was a pause. "Tessa, that's not normal. You need to tell someone. Go to the police." "I don't even know what to say," I replied. "They'll think I'm paranoid. And what if it really is connected to the ring? What if talking draws more attention?" "Then you need to get that thing somewhere safe," she said firmly. "A bank vault, maybe. Or a safety deposit box. You can't just keep it in your apartment." Her voice grounded me. She was right. I couldn't just sit around waiting for something to happen. I decided to go back to Mr. Lenhart's shop that afternoon to ask his advice about how to protect the ring properly. When I arrived, the bell above the door chimed softly. Mr. Lenhart looked up from the counter, his face lighting up with cautious recognition. "Ah, Miss Tessa. I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up?" I hesitated. Honestly, a little scared. "I think someone might be following me." His expression turned grave immediately. "Tell me everything." I described the man in the gray coat, the way he'd been watching me outside the shop, and then again at my apartment. Mr. Lenhart listened silently, his fingers steepled under his chin. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "I was afraid of that." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "Word travels quickly in the antiques world, especially about pieces with historical significance. I haven't told anyone specific details, but even whispers can attract the wrong crowd. There are collectors who deal in stolen artifacts, private buyers who would pay any price for something like your ring." I swallowed hard. "So, what should I do?" "For now, don't go anywhere alone," he said firmly. "Keep the ring hidden, don't wear it, don't talk about it, and don't tell anyone new what it's worth." I nodded. "I understand." He hesitated before adding, "And Miss Tessa, if that man appears again, do not confront him. Call the police immediately. Promise me." "I promise." I left the shop feeling both reassured and terrified. The air outside was crisp, but I could feel sweat on my palms. I checked both sides of the street before walking to my car, but everything looked normal. Maybe, just maybe, it was over. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table, staring at the ring box under the warm light. Damon called twice, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to tell him anything, not after how he'd treated me. The last thing I needed was his judgment or fake concern. Instead, I called Mariah again and told her everything Mr. Lenhart had said. "Then we do this together," she said without hesitation. "I'll help you find a place to keep it safe. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone." The next few days passed quietly. Too quietly. I started to think maybe the man had moved on, or maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. I even caught myself relaxing again, though I still double-checked my locks every night. Then, on Friday, just as I was leaving work, I saw him again. He was standing across the street from the library, leaning against a lamppost. The same gray coat, the same expressionless face. My blood ran cold. I froze, pretending to look for my keys, but my hands were shaking too much. When I finally looked up, he was gone. I rushed home, locked every door, and called Mariah immediately. "He's back," I whispered. "Where are you right now?" "At home." "Good. Don't leave. I'll come over." True to her word. Mariah arrived within 20 minutes, carrying her overnight bag and a determined expression. "You're not staying alone," she said. "We'll figure this out together." Her presence made me feel safer, at least for a little while. We ordered takeout, stayed up watching movies, and tried to laugh it off. But when I went to the window before bed, I saw headlights flash once outside then disappear. "Maybe it's nothing," Mariah said, trying to sound optimistic. But deep down, we both knew it wasn't nothing. Someone was watching me, and they weren't going away. That night, I dreamed again of my grandmother. She stood in a field of mist, holding the ring in her wrinkled hand. Her voice was soft but urgent. "Keep it safe, Tessa. It's not just jewelry, it's a promise." I woke up sweating, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I got up, opened the drawer where I'd hidden the ring, and held it tightly. And as I did, I caught a faint reflection in the window, a silhouette moving outside my building, stopping right beneath my window before melting back into the dark. I should have realized Damon wasn't just cruel, he was dangerous. The following morning I was a wreck. Mariah had stayed the night, but neither of us slept much. Every creak of the building made us jump. When I finally left for work, the parking lot looked normal, no gray coat, no suspicious cars, but my nerves were on edge. By lunchtime, I'd had enough of pretending I was fine. I called in sick for the rest of the day and went straight home. When I walked in, Damon was there, sitting on the couch like he owned the place. His legs were crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. "Skipping work, are we?" he asked, glancing up from his phone. I froze. "What are you doing here? You don't even live here anymore." He shrugged. "I still have the spare key." "Relax, Tessa. I just came to talk." "About what?" I asked, my voice trembling. He stood and started pacing. "About that ring. I saw you sneaking around that antique shop last week." "Don't bother lying," I asked around. "Apparently you've been having some fancy appraisal done." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You followed me?" "I had to," he said smoothly. "You've been acting secretive, and then you start visiting antique dealers? You can't blame me for being curious." I crossed my arms, trying to sound braver than I felt. "That ring is none of your business, Damon." He smiled coldly. "Oh, but it is. We're engaged, remember? What's yours is mine. Especially if it's worth something." My stomach twisted. "You don't even know what it's worth." He leaned closer, his tone low and calculated. "I know enough. I made a few calls. You wouldn't believe how fast people's ears perk up when you mention an 18th century sapphire. Seems you've been keeping quite the secret, sweetheart." I took a step back, horrified. "You told people about it?" Damon shrugged, completely unbothered. "I might have reached out to a few potential buyers. Harmless curiosity." "Buyers?" My voice broke. "You tried to sell my grandmother's ring?" "Correction," he said with a smirk. "Our ring. If it's as valuable as it sounds, it could set us up for life. Think about it, we could pay off the wedding, buy a house, travel." "Stop!" I snapped, my hands shaking. "You had no right." For a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw the greed behind his eyes. He wasn't just thoughtless, he was scheming. "You're overreacting," he said flatly. "I'm trying to help. You're sitting on a fortune and too naive to do anything about it." "You're unbelievable," I whispered. "You're using me." He laughed. "Using you? Tessa, please, I've been carrying you. You work in a school library, for God's sake. Be realistic." I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. "Get out of my apartment, Damon," he scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. Get out." His jaw tightened. For a second, I thought he might hit me. But then he turned, muttering something under his breath, and stormed toward the door. Before he left, he looked back at me and said, "You'll regret this, Tessa. That ring isn't safe in your hands." Then, the door slammed, rattling the frame. I sank onto the couch, shaking uncontrollably. The man I'd once trusted more than anyone had become a stranger. Worse, he'd become a threat. When Mariah came by that evening, I told her everything. She looked horrified. "You have to change your locks," she said immediately. "If he still has a key." "I already called the locksmith." I interrupted, wiping my eyes. "He'll be here tomorrow morning." Mariah hugged me tightly. "You did the right thing. Damon's gone too far." But even as she said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Damon wasn't the type to walk away quietly. The next day, 2 men showed up at my door claiming to be from an insurance agency. They wore suits and carried clipboards, flashing fake-looking badges. "Miss Tessa Lane?" one asked. "We're here to appraise valuables for your fiancé's policy." For a split second, I froze. "What policy?" He smiled politely. "Mr. Damon Kavanaugh said you'd be expecting us." My blood ran cold. "Damon, of course. I think there's been a mistake," I said, forcing a calm tone. "I didn't request any appraisal." They exchanged quick glances. One of them said, "We just need a moment to verify a few items. It'll only take a minute." "No," I said firmly. The taller one narrowed his eyes. "We'll be back," he said flatly, before the 2 turned and walked away. As soon as the door closed, I locked it and called Mariah. "They came to my door," I whispered. 2 men. They said they were insurance agents." She gasped. "Damon sent them, didn't he?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I think so. He's trying to get the ring." Mariah's voice grew sharp. "Tessa, this is serious. You can't stay there anymore. Pack a bag and come to my place tonight." I didn't argue. Within the hour, I threw a few essentials into a duffel bag, along with the ring box, which I tucked deep inside a sweater. As I left, I caught my reflection in the mirror, pale, exhausted, determined. I wasn't going to be Damon's victim anymore. When I got to Mariah's apartment, she met me at the door with open arms. "You're safe here," she said. "We'll figure this out." I nodded, clutching the ring box tightly. "He can try all he wants," I murmured. "He's never getting this ring." But as I unpacked that night, a single thought kept echoing in my head. If Damon had already sent strangers to my home, what else was he willing to do? And as I lay down to sleep on Mariah's couch, I didn't notice the dark car parked across the street, engine idling, its headlights off, waiting. I thought leaving Damon would make me safe, but danger was just beginning. Living with Mariah should have felt like relief, a sanctuary away from everything Damon had poisoned in my life. But from the first night, I couldn't shake the sense that I'd simply traded one kind of fear for another. Every time I looked out the window, I half expected to see the silver sedan again, or worse, Damon himself standing in the shadows, smirking like he always did when he thought he had the upper hand. Mariah did her best to distract me. She made hot tea, turned on cheerful music, and kept reminding me, "You're safe now, Tessa. He can't touch you." But my body wouldn't listen. I jumped at every phone vibration, flinched at every creak in the walls. 3 days after I moved in, I got the first text. "Unknown number. You can't hide forever." I froze, staring at the message. My throat went dry. There was no name, no context, but I knew. Damon. It had to be him. When I showed Mariah, her face drained of color. "Block that number right now," she said. I did, but it didn't help. 2 hours later, another one came from a different number. "That ring doesn't belong to you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat awake in Mariah's guest room, clutching the small safe box where I'd locked the ring inside. My grandmother's words echoed in my head like a prayer. "It will protect you one day." I just didn't know how. The next morning, we decided to go back to Mr. Lenhart's shop. He greeted us with a weary smile but frowned when he saw how shaken I was. "What's happened?" he asked. I told him everything. The fake insurance agents, the texts, the car. His brow furrowed deeply. "It's as I feared," he said quietly. "Someone has learned about the ring. Once that kind of information is out, it spreads like wildfire among collectors. Some will pay for it, others will steal for it." Mariah crossed her arms. "So, what are we supposed to do? Call the police? They'll laugh at us for being paranoid." Mr. Lenhart shook his head. "No, you're not paranoid. You're in real danger. But the police can't protect something they don't understand the value of. You need to secure the ring somewhere no one can reach it." I took a deep breath. "Like where?" he thought for a moment. "A bank vault would be safest. Get a deposit box under your name only. Don't tell anyone, not even me, where it's stored." It made sense. If Damon, or whoever else was behind the texts, didn't know where the ring was, they couldn't use it against me. Mariah agreed to come with me that afternoon to set it up. But the world had other plans. As we drove toward the downtown bank, I caught sight of a gray car in the rearview mirror. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. Then it turned whenever we turned. My pulse started to race. "Mariah," I whispered, "that car's been behind us for 5 blocks. She glanced at the mirror, her jaw tightening. "Keep driving. Don't go to the bank yet. Turn into the grocery store parking lot." I did as she said. We parked, waited a minute, and watched. The gray car slowed down as it passed, then circled the block. Mariah's voice was steady but tense. "They're following us." I felt my stomach drop. "What do we do?" "Call the police," she said immediately. "Tell them someone's stalking you." I dialed, but the dispatcher's tone was polite and detached. "Do you have proof they're following you, ma'am?" "No. But, have they approached or threatened you?" "Not directly, but..." "Without evidence, we can only file an observation report." I hung up, feeling helpless. Mariah grabbed my hand. "Okay," she said, thinking quickly. "Forget the bank today. We'll go back to my place, stay low for a while. If they're watching, we can't lead them to the ring's location." We drove in silence. The gray car didn't reappear, but the tension stayed. When we got back to her apartment, Mariah pulled the blinds shut and locked every door. "You're not alone in this," she said softly. "We'll keep the ring safe until we figure out who's behind this." Her confidence helped just a little. For the next 2 days, we kept to a routine. I stayed off social media, ignored unknown calls, and avoided going out alone. But the messages didn't stop. They kept coming from new numbers, all saying variations of the same thing. "That ring isn't yours. Give it back before it's too late. You don't know what you have." By the 3rd day, even Mariah was rattled. "This is getting out of hand," she said. "We can't just sit here. Let's take it to the bank tomorrow morning." "Early, before anyone's around," I agreed. That night, we packed the ring securely inside a plain envelope and placed it in her purse. I tried to sleep, but my heart wouldn't stop racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was coming. At dawn, we left quietly, the world still half asleep. The bank was only a 10-minute drive away. The streets were empty. Sunlight just starting to break through the fog. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of relief. Mariah parked right in front of the glass doors. We walked inside, greeted by the scent of disinfectant and the distant hum of an air conditioner. The teller smiled politely as we asked about opening a safety deposit box. I filled out the paperwork with trembling hands while Mariah stood beside me, her purse clutched tightly. But just as I signed my name, the doors behind us swung open and a voice shouted, "Everyone down!" I turned and saw 2 masked men, one holding a gun, the other waving a black duffel bag. Panic erupted, instantly screams, people dropping to the floor, chaos. Mariah grabbed my arm and pulled me behind the counter, her eyes wide with terror. The ring was still in her purse. My mind screamed one thought over and over, "They're here for it." And when one of the masked men spotted us and pointed directly in our direction, yelling, That's it, the bag. I knew they hadn't come for money, they'd come for me. We were just steps from safety when chaos erupted. The sound of the gunshot was deafening. It echoed through the marble halls of the bank like thunder, freezing everyone in place. Mariah's grip on my arm tightened until it hurt. People were screaming, diving for cover behind chairs and desks. My heart felt like it was beating somewhere in my throat, so loud I could barely hear anything else. The taller of the two masked men barked orders. "Nobody move! Stay down and no one gets hurt!" His voice was calm, practiced like someone who'd done this before. The shorter one kept pacing near the door, waving his gun wildly at anyone who twitched. Mariah and I crouched behind the customer service desk. My hands shook uncontrollably as I clutched the envelope with the ring still inside. I could feel the shape of the small box pressing against my palm. I'd brought this cursed thing to protect it, and now it had brought me here to the middle of a robbery. "What do we do?" Mariah whispered, her face pale. I swallowed hard. "We wait. We stay quiet." For a moment, I thought maybe we'd blend in. Maybe the robbers would just take cash and leave. But then one of them, the taller one, turned his head sharply, eyes locking on me. His gaze darted from my face to my hand, to the envelope I was holding. He froze, then pointed. "That's it! That's the one!" My stomach dropped. He wasn't here for the bank's money. He was here for the ring. Before I could react, he started toward us. Gun raised. Mariah gasped, pulling me back, but there was nowhere to go. We were trapped between the counter and the wall. My breath came out in shallow bursts. "Give it to me," he yelled. "Now." I didn't move. My mind screamed to hand it over to just give him the stupid ring, but something in me refused. My grandmother's voice echoed faintly in the back of my mind. The robbers panicked. "They tripped the alarm," the shorter one shouted. The taller man cursed and grabbed my arm. "We're not leaving empty-handed. Give it to me, lady." Mariah stood up suddenly, shoving him hard. "Leave her alone," she shouted. It startled him just long enough for me to duck away. He stumbled back, his grip loosening. I bolted behind a nearby pillar, clutching the ring to my chest. Within seconds, the front doors burst open and officers flooded in, shouting commands. The robbers fired wildly before diving behind furniture. It all happened in a blur of shouting, gunfire, and glass shattering. Someone grabbed my shoulder. I nearly screamed until I saw it was a police officer. "Ma'am, come with me," he yelled. I didn't think I just ran, following him and Mariah toward the emergency exit at the side of the bank. Outside, the cold air hit my face like a slap. I could still hear gunshots inside, but the police were closing in fast. I collapsed against the brick wall, gasping for breath, the envelope still clutched in my hand. Mariah wrapped her arms around me, trembling. After what felt like forever, an officer came over. "Are you two all right?" I nodded weakly. They were after me. Not the money. The officer frowned. "What do you mean?" "The ring," I said, my voice shaking. "They wanted a ring I have. It's valuable." He exchanged a glance with another officer. "We'll need a statement. Come down to the station when you're ready." Inside, the robbers were taken into custody. The taller one, the one who had shouted at me, was dragged out in handcuffs, still yelling. "You don't know what you have, lady. It doesn't belong to you." His words sent chills racing down my spine. Later, at the police station, I told them everything from the antique shop to the man in the gray coat, to Damon's sudden obsession with the ring. They took notes, nodding occasionally but not saying much. When one detective came in holding a phone bagged as evidence, he said, "We found this on one of the suspects." He placed it on the table in front of me. My blood ran cold. I recognized the case. Damon had the exact same one. "Is this familiar?" the detective asked. "Yes," I whispered. "It's my fiancé's phone case." He nodded grimly. We checked the recent call logs. There are multiple calls and messages exchanged between one of the robbers and a contact saved as Damon C. "Do you know a Damon Kavanaugh?" I felt the air leave my lungs. "Yes," I said faintly. That's him. The detective sighed. I'm sorry, ma'am, but it looks like your fiancé may have arranged this. For a long moment I couldn't speak. I stared at the phone, at my reflection in the cold metal table, at the ring still hidden in my purse. I had loved Damon once. I'd trusted him with everything I was. And now, he'd tried to have me robbed, maybe even killed for this ring. When Mariah and I left the station that night, she slipped her arm around my shoulders. You know what this means, right? She said softly. I nodded slowly. Yeah. My voice was quiet but hard. It means I'm done being scared. She looked at me, surprised by the calm in my tone. What are you going to do? I turned the ring box over in my hands, feeling its weight, its quiet power. I'm going to end this. For good. Mariah's eyes widened. Tessa, what do you mean? I met her gaze. He started this because of greed. I'm going to make sure he pays for it with everything he's got. That night, as I sat alone in the glow of my lamp, I slid the ring back onto my finger for the first time in days. It felt heavier, now stronger, almost alive, and as I stared at it, one thought burned clear in my mind. Damon was going to regret ever touching what wasn't his. If Damon wanted to profit from my ring, I'd make sure he paid dearly for it. I sat at Mariah's kitchen table with the ring box between us like a tiny adversary, the silver band catching the lamplight and throwing it back in quiet defiance. I had spent the night turning the idea over and over in my head, and now the edges of anger had sharpened into something that felt like purpose. Mariah watched me, her jaw set, and for the first time since all of this started, I felt less like a hunted thing and more like someone ready to act. We need a plan, I told her. Not revenge for the sake of anger, but a way to make sure Damon never hurts anyone else for money. She nodded. Smart, legal, and irreversible, she said. I don't want you doing anything that will put you in danger alone, I agreed. I wasn't going to be reckless, I was going to be deliberate. I called Mr. Lenhart first, explaining everything calmly while Mariah took notes. He was quieter than I remembered, which meant he was thinking. You can set a trap, he said finally. But you'll need proof recordings, witnesses, a legal chain. If he's already willing to use strangers to steal from you, he won't stop without evidence that puts him away. We spent the afternoon laying out the pieces. Mr. Lenhart would continue his provenance work and quietly provide documents that established a clear line of ownership from Duchess Amara to my grandmother. Those papers could prove the ring wasn't stolen property and would anchor my legal claim. Mariah would help by being my partner in the field. She'd be there the whole time so I wouldn't be alone. I called a detective I'd met briefly at the station and explained what we suspected about Damon's involvement in the attempted robbery. He didn't promise miracles but agreed to listen and to have an undercover presence ready if we could lure Damon into making an explicit move. We decided the bait would be appearing to sell the ring. Not for real, never for real, but convincing enough to tempt Damon into making contact with buyers or arranging a meet where he would negotiate or admit his orchestration. I created an email address and a burner phone under a false name. Mariah helped craft messages that sounded impatient and greedy, hints that the seller was willing to move quickly for the right offer. We planted a rumor through a discreet collector contact Mr. Lenhart knew, careful to make it seem like word leaked naturally. The detective positioned an undercover officer nearby and agreed to have a small team on standby if Damon showed up to the meet. We discussed contingencies, what to do if Damon brought muscle, if he tried to turn violent, if he refused to cooperate. I wanted to make him think I had gone soft, that I'd forgive him if he simply handed over control to the right buyer. It felt strange to play the part of the gullible woman again, but it was necessary. I rehearsed lines in my head until they sounded natural, apologetic, resigned, tempting. I would invite him to his apartment, the place he still could access, the place he thought he controlled, and I would pretend to be ready to sell. The detective insisted on recording everything, and Mr. Lenhart hand-delivered a stack of authenticated provenance documents to the station, sealed and logged. This is the paper trail that will keep him behind bars if he tries to move the ring illegally, he said. Don't underestimate how many people will try to gaslight you or claim they have rights to it. Keep copies of everything. On the morning of the sting, I felt like I had swallowed a stone. I dressed in something ordinary, nothing that would draw attention. Nothing that would make Damon assume I'd come for sympathy. Mariah met me at the door and squeezed my hand. "No matter what happens," she whispered, "I've got you." When I pulled up to Damon's building, my stomach did a small, traitorous flip. He answered the door with a rehearsed smile and that old charm I used to mistake for love. He ushered me in like a man who expected his plan to succeed without hiccups. I set the ring box on the kitchen table where he could see it and let my face fall into the expression I'd practiced. Tired, apologetic, ready to sell. He leaned forward, greed softening his features into something almost polite. He started offering prices, names of buyers, plans of how to launder the money, and the detective listening through a bug heard every word. Damon's voice rose with excitement. He mouthed agreements, bragged about the insurance he'd lined up, and casually admitted to arranging a demonstration at the bank to flush out owners of similar pieces. That last admission made the blood drain from my face. I kept my hands still, my throat tight, watching him prove his own guilt. The undercover officer signaled from the hallway. The apartment door opened a crack as two plainclothes officers slipped inside. Damon froze, then laughed a hysterical, high-pitched sound and tried to grab the ring. Before he could, officers moved in, cuffing him while he protested and blamed me for everything. As they led him toward the door, he turned to me with an expression I'll never forget, an ugly, raw mixture of fury and defeat. The night of the meeting, everything comes to a head. I walked into that apartment ready to face the man who betrayed me. Even though the police had briefed me a dozen times on how the sting would work, my heart still felt like it was breaking all over again as I stood outside Damon's apartment door. It wasn't fear that made my hands shake, it was disbelief. How had I loved someone so cruel, so greedy, for so long without seeing what he really was? The detective's voice buzzed softly through the earpiece. "Stay calm, Tessa. You're doing great. Just keep him talking. We're right outside." I took a deep breath and knocked. The sound felt louder than it should have. Moments later, the door swung open, and there he was, Damon Cavanaugh, impeccably dressed as always, acting like nothing had happened. "Tessa," he said smoothly, flashing that confident smile I used to fall for. "You came." "I said I would," I replied evenly, stepping inside. My palms were damp, but I kept my voice steady. I wanted to talk face to face. About everything. His eyes flicked toward the small velvet box in my hand. "You brought it." "I did," I said, setting it gently on the table. "I thought maybe we could work something out." Damon's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "You're doing the right thing. That ring isn't doing you any favors sitting in a box. We can turn it into something useful." I swallowed the disgust that rose in my throat. "Like what?" He shrugged, casually pouring himself a drink. "A better life. You, me, a fresh start. No more arguing, no more secrets. We sell the ring, split the money, and move on." I forced a shaky laugh. "You make it sound so simple." "It is," he said, sitting across from me. "I already have buyers lined up, serious people. All I need is for you to hand it over." The detective's voice whispered faintly in my ear again. "He's admitting. Keep him talking." I leaned forward, pretending to hesitate. "How did you even find these buyers so quickly?" He chuckled, tapping the side of his head. "Connections, sweetheart. You'd be amazed what people will tell you when they think you're offering royalty. And besides," his tone darkened, "I had to get creative after you ran off and called the cops on me." My stomach twisted. "You mean the bank robbery?" I said softly. He froze for a moment, then smirked. "Oh, that. I didn't think they'd actually go that far." "You sent men after me," I said, my voice trembling. He rolled his eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. I was trying to push you into making a decision. You've always been too sentimental for your own good." Something inside me snapped. I wanted to scream, to throw the drink in his face, to make him feel every ounce of fear I'd felt. But I couldn't. I had to stick to the plan. I steadied my tone. "If I give you the ring, will you leave me alone?" He smiled lazily. "I'll do better than that. I'll make you rich. I pushed the box across the table toward him. He reached for it greedily, eyes locked on the prize. Finally, he murmured. You're learning. That's when I pressed the small button on the inside of my bracelet, the silent signal for the officers waiting outside. Damon flipped open the box, his grin faltering when he saw the ring glint under the light. Beautiful, he said softly. You have no idea how much this is worth. Some collectors are offering 7 figures. The door burst open before he could finish. Police! Don't move! Damon's head snapped up in shock. He stumbled backward, his glass shattering on the floor. What the hell is this? I stood, my heart racing, as 2 undercover officers rushed in, weapons drawn. Damon Cavanaugh, one of them said. You're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted theft, and arranging a day, violent robbery. He turned on me, his face twisting in fury. You set me up! He spat. I met his glare without flinching. No, Damon. You set yourself up. He lunged toward the table, but one of the officers caught him, twisting his arms behind his back. He fought, shouting incoherently about how he was owed and how I'd ruined his life. But the fight drained out of him quickly when he saw the detective enter, holding up a recorder. It's all on tape, the detective said calmly. Every word you just said. They led him toward the door, his face red with rage. You'll regret this, Tessa, he shouted. You think you've won? That ring will destroy you just like it destroyed them. I didn't respond. I just stood there, watching him disappear down the hallway. For the first time in months, I felt the air around me clear. When the apartment was finally quiet again, I sat down, staring at the small ring resting in the velvet box. It looked peaceful, innocent, like it hadn't just caused chaos and heartbreak. The detective placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, he said. He won't hurt you anymore. Mariah entered a few minutes later, relief washing over her face when she saw me safe. It's over, she whispered. He's gone. I nodded slowly, though my heart still raced. It's over, I repeated, more to myself than to her. But as I slipped the ring back into its box, I couldn't shake Damon's last words from my mind. That ring will destroy you just like it destroyed them. The words echoed through me as I walked out of that apartment, the weight of everything finally crashing down. Damon was gone, but his shadow lingered, and deep inside, I had the uneasy feeling that the ring's story was far from finished. After the chaos ended, I needed answers about where the ring truly came from. Even with Damon behind bars, my mind wouldn't rest. The days that followed, his arrest were strangely quiet, like the world was catching its breath after months of storming around me. But I couldn't stop thinking about the ring, its secrets, its danger, and the life it had destroyed before it even reached my hands. Damon's last words haunted me. That ring will destroy you just like it destroyed them. Who were they? And what did he mean by destroyed? I decided I couldn't move on without knowing everything. I needed to understand my grandmother's connection to this cursed treasure. Mr. Lenhart was the only one I trusted to help me. When I stepped into his shop again, it felt different, warmer, somehow safer than before. He greeted me with the same kind smile, though his eyes were full of concern. I heard about the arrest, he said softly. I'm glad you're safe. Thank you, I replied, setting the ring on the counter. But I can't stop thinking about what Damon said before they took him away. He mentioned others being destroyed by this ring. I need to know everything you can find about it, about my family. He studied me carefully for a moment, then nodded. I thought you might say that. I've already started digging into its lineage. He disappeared into the back room and returned with a thick binder full of photocopies, handwritten notes, and photos of old documents. I traced ownership records, wills, and shipping manifests from the Duchy's fall through the 20th century. It wasn't easy, but I think you deserve to see this. As he opened the binder, I leaned closer. The first page was a portrait I recognized, the Duchess Amara herself, regal and distant, wearing the same ring. Below it was a caption written in elegant cursive. The Celestine blue, passed to the Duchess's bloodline as a token of protection and truth. Protection and truth, I murmured, my fingers brushing the words. Mr. Lenhart nodded. According to records, The ring was rumored to have been commissioned by the Duchess's husband for her safety during a period of political unrest. It was meant to be a symbol of resilience, not wealth. After her death, it vanished. Most historians assumed it was stolen, but I found evidence it may have been smuggled out by a servant loyal to her family. He flipped another page, revealing faded immigration papers. A woman named Amaris Duval, a name that appears nowhere in the duchy's known servant records, left Europe after the war, carrying a piece of blue sapphire jewelry of sentimental worth. Her signature matches one found in your grandmother's old library card application here in the States. I felt my breath catch. So, my grandmother was Amaris Duval? More likely, she was born under that name or took it later to hide her lineage, he said. What's remarkable is this. He pulled out an old photograph. My grandmother, as a young woman, smiling in front of a small house I recognized from childhood. On her finger, even then, was the same ring. She kept it her whole life, he said gently. Tears welled in my eyes. She never told me any of this. She never talked about her past at all. Perhaps she wanted to protect you, he said softly. These kinds of legacies often bring danger, as you've seen firsthand. I nodded, remembering her voice on those quiet nights when I was a child. Some things are worth keeping secret until the world is ready to understand them. Maybe she'd known the truth would bring trouble. Maybe she'd hoped the ring's power would sleep quietly with her. Mr. Lenhart flipped another page. There's something else, he said, showing me an entry from an old museum catalog. The ring's twin. Or rather, a fragment of what was believed to be its twin. It was once owned by a rival family in Europe who claimed the Duchess's descendants had no right to the gem. They fought over it for decades. Many of those involved died under suspicious circumstances, accidents, thefts, fires. I shivered. Destroyed, I whispered. That's what Damon meant. He nodded solemnly. It said the ring brings misfortune to those who covet it for greed. But to those who carry it with honor, it protects them. Your grandmother likely understood that difference. That's why she left it to you and not anyone else. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. She knew this would happen. She tried to warn me. He closed the binder gently. You've survived everything it's thrown your way. That's not destruction, Tessa. That's strength. I smiled weakly. Maybe it's both. As I left the shop, I felt the air around me shift. The world looked sharper, clearer. As if the truth had stripped away the fog I'd been living under. I stopped at the park on my way home and sat on a bench, holding the ring up to the light. The sapphire glowed faintly, its color deep and endless like the sky before dawn. It wasn't just jewelry. It was history, my history. It carried the legacy of women who'd endured war, betrayal, and loss, and still found a way to survive. For the first time, I felt proud instead of burdened. That night, I called Mariah and told her everything. She listened quietly, then said, "So, it's not a curse. It's a warning and a gift." "Exactly," I said. "It's my family's story. I think it's time people know it." She hesitated. "You're going public?" I nodded. "Not for the money. For the truth. My grandmother spent her life in silence. I won't." Mr. Lenhart offered to help me document the story and place the ring in a museum under my family's name, but as I stared at it, shining in my hand, I realized I wasn't quite ready to let it go. When the news broke about the ring's history, offers poured in from around the world. The morning after, Mr. Lenhart and I presented the provenance documents to a small, reputable historical journal. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters wanted interviews, bloggers wanted pictures, and collectors, the collectors sent polite emails that read like thinly veiled demands. The local news ran a cautious story about an unexpected historical find, and within 24 hours, national outlets picked it up. My inbox filled with messages from institutions I'd only ever read about in textbooks. Suddenly, the shy librarian who'd spent her weekends shelving old mysteries was at the center of a storm I'd never invited. Offers began to arrive as if money could replace the years of secrecy and the lives entangled with that tiny band of gold. A private buyer emailed an offer that made my hands go numb. $4.5 million, transferred immediately, no questions asked. Another collector proposed an even larger private sale with conditions that made my skin crawl: secret delivery, anonymous ownership, discreet handling by people with no conscience. Museums reached out with a different tone. The curator at the Vensaria Heritage Museum asked if I would consider a long-term loan, offering to create an exhibit not just about the ring but about its lineage, the women who carried it, and the survival it symbolized. They wanted to tell the story with respect, not to hide it behind glass for the highest bidder. I sat with the offers for days, reading each message until my eyes blurred. Mariah sat across from me at her kitchen table, a stack of printouts strewn between us. "You've got leverage," she said, tapping a headline with her finger. "You could do anything with this money, Tess." I pushed the thought away. Money had been the reason Damon had tried to destroy me. Money had nearly cost me my life. I thought about the little house where my grandmother had raised me, about the women in those pages Mr. Lenhart had shown me who'd hidden treasures behind quilts and beneath floorboards to protect a legacy. Selling it outright to the highest bidder felt like betraying them. Like letting greed erase the stories stitched into that ring. The private buyer kept emailing, polite and persistent. "Think it over." His messages read, "A decision like this could secure your future." It was tempting: pay off debt, help Mariah finish her degree, fix the library's leaky roof, but every time I pictured handing over the ring to a faceless vault, the image felt hollow. The museum's offer, however, felt different. They wanted to preserve context. Photographs of my grandmother, the binder of records Lenhart had compiled, a recorded oral history so people could hear my grandmother's voice through me. They proposed a traveling exhibit titled Legacy of the Lost Duchess, which would tour 3 institutions and place a permanent plaque crediting my family for protecting the peace. It wasn't fortune for my bank account, but it promised something else: truth, education, recognition. I met with the museum curator in a vaulted room smelling faintly of beeswax and old paper. He spoke with a reverence that didn't feel performative. "We won't hide it," he said. "We'll tell the whole story. Your grandmother will be remembered as she should be." That night, alone on my couch, I turned the ring over in my hands. The blue of the stone seemed deeper than ever, reflecting not just light but history. I thought of Damon's slick promises and the bank robbery, of the men who had stalked me, and of the lineup of offers that would have erased the ring's meaning. I called Mariah. "I'm going to loan it to the museum," I told her. "Not sell. Loan." She exhaled a sound that was half relief, half awe. "That feels right," she said. We contacted the museum's legal team and arranged a loan agreement that protected the ring and my rights as the legal owner. Mr. Lenhart helped catalog every scratch, every hallmark, and the curator assigned a conservator to care for it. The exhibit opened 2 months later, with a quiet dedication. The room was small but thoughtful: photographs, maps, the binder of documents, a recorded interview of me reading my grandmother's letters. I stood behind the velvet rope as strangers leaned in, eyes soft with curiosity and sometimes moisture. They weren't just looking at jewelry, they were listening to a story of survival and secrecy. Cameras flashed, but their light felt different here, less like predatory magnification and more like shared wonder. Damon's name came up in a few interviews, and I answered as simply as I could. The law had taken its course. People applauded the exhibit's sensitivity, and letter after letter arrived from descendants who'd recognized faces in the photos, from historians offering additional records, from women who said my story had given them courage to reclaim their family histories. On opening night, as the crowd gathered beneath the soft lamps, I spotted someone near the back of the room, a face I didn't expect to see again. He stood there, taller than I remembered, shoulders hunched as if the weight of his choices had settled on him, and when his eyes met mine across the crowd, everything inside me clenched. He looked different, older, defeated, but it was unmistakably Damon. The air inside the museum shifted the moment I saw him. It was like the temperature dropped, even though no one else seemed to notice. Damon stood near the back of the exhibit hall, dressed plainly in a dark coat. His once slick hair now shorter, his posture slouched. For a second, I thought I was imagining him a ghost dredged up by memory, but then his eyes met mine, and I knew. I froze where I stood, every muscle in my body going rigid. Mariah noticed my expression and followed my gaze. "Oh my God," she whispered under her breath. "What's he doing here?" "I don't know," I murmured, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Damon looked thinner, his skin sallow, the arrogance drained out of him. There was no expensive suit, no polished smile, just a man who'd lost everything. He started walking toward me slowly, weaving through the crowd of visitors admiring the displays. Mariah moved closer. "Do you want me to call security?" I shook my head. "No, let's see what he wants." When he reached me, he stopped a few feet away, keeping his voice low. "Tessa," he said softly, almost pleading. "I didn't come to cause trouble. I just needed to see you." I stared at him, searching his face for some sign of deceit, some glimmer of the manipulative man I'd known. But all I saw was exhaustion. "You shouldn't be here," I said finally. "You're not supposed to contact me." "I know," he said, glancing at the ring encased in glass nearby. I wanted to see it, to see how it all turned out." The irony of it nearly made me laugh. "You mean how you tried to steal it? How you almost got people killed for it?" He winced but didn't argue. "I was stupid," he admitted quietly. "I thought if I could sell it, everything would make sense again. The debt, the pressure, my parents, the expectations." I cut him off. "Don't make excuses. You almost destroyed my life." He nodded slowly, shame flickering in his eyes. "I know. And I'm sorry, Tessa. Truly. You don't have to believe me, but prison, it changes a person." For a moment, I just stared at him, trying to process the man in front of me. This wasn't the confident manipulator who'd barked orders and treated me like a possession. This was someone smaller, broken in ways I couldn't recognize. "I don't hate you, Damon," I said softly. "But I'll never forgive what you did. You made me question my worth, my sanity, my safety. You tried to take the one thing my grandmother trusted me with." He swallowed hard, looking down at his shoes. "You're right. I ruined everything good that ever came near me. I needed to tell you I was sorry before I disappear for good." "Disappear?" I asked cautiously. He gave a humorless laugh. "The plea deal's over. I served my time, but I've got nothing left. My job's gone, my family's done with me. I just wanted to see what it all cost me to see you doing what I couldn't." Something inside me softened, not forgiveness, but understanding. He was still Damon, but stripped of the arrogance. He was just a man who'd destroyed his own life, chasing something he never understood. "Why did you care so much about the ring?" I asked quietly. "Was it really just money?" He hesitated. "At first, yes, but then it became about power. Everyone wanted that ring, buyers, collectors, thieves, and for once, I thought I could be the one in control. I thought if I had it, no one could look down on me again." I shook my head. "And that's what destroyed you." He gave a bitter smile. "Seems like it. Maybe your grandmother was right, it protects the right person and ruins the wrong one." We stood there in silence for a long moment, surrounded by the quiet murmur of museum visitors and the faint hum of the climate control system. The glass display that held the ring shimmered between us, its sapphire stone catching the light just so. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Damon said finally. "I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry. For everything. For the lies, for the pain, for not seeing what you were worth." I exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from my shoulders. "Apologies don't fix everything," I said gently. "But I hope you mean it." "I do," he said, his voice barely audible. "Take care of yourself, Tessa." He turned to leave, his footsteps fading into the murmur of the crowd. For a brief second, I considered calling out to him, but I didn't. Some goodbyes are meant to stay unspoken. Mariah touched my arm. "You okay?" I nodded, though my eyes burned. "Yeah, I think so." He looked empty. She sighed. "Some people only find peace when they lose everything." We stood together, watching the last of the visitors drift toward the exit. The curator dimmed the lights slightly, and the ring's sapphire glowed softly in the case, a pulse of blue in the dark. It didn't look cursed anymore. It looked alive, like it carried every heartbreak and triumph that had shaped its journey to this moment. I whispered, almost to myself. My grandmother was right. It really does protect those who understand it. Mariah smiled. And it exposed those who didn't. We left the museum as the lights dimmed further, the air outside cool and crisp. I took one last look through the glass doors, where Damon's shadow had just disappeared down the street. He never looked back. That night, I stood alone before the ring's display one last time, tracing the words engraved on its plaque and realizing that, for the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by what others had mocked. I was defined by what I'd survived. I never imagined the ring everyone mocked would define my destiny. A year passed after that night at the museum. The chaos that had once consumed my life slowly dissolved into something gentler, something almost peaceful. I moved back into my grandmother's old house, the one with the white shutters and creaky porch swing that always smelled faintly of lilacs in the spring. It felt right, grounding. Every corner of that place whispered her presence. The recipe cards in her handwriting, the faint scent of lavender on the curtains, and of course, the little glass case where her ring once rested before it changed everything. The museum kept their promise. The legacy of the Lost Duchess exhibit traveled across the country, drawing thousands of visitors. I attended the openings whenever I could, standing quietly in the back as people listened to the story told through photos, documents, and the recordings Mr. Lenhart and I made. I never grew tired of watching their faces, how their curiosity turned into awe, how their smiles softened when they learned about my grandmother's courage. At first, the attention was overwhelming. I'd gone from being a librarian to someone people wrote articles about. Reporters called me the guardian of a royal secret, though I never thought of it that way. I wasn't guarding treasure, I was preserving truth, and that truth had given me a voice I didn't know I had. With Mr. Lenhart's encouragement, I founded a small non-profit called the Amara Foundation, named after the Duchess herself, to help women preserve and document family heirlooms before their stories were lost. What began as a few local workshops grew quickly. Museums partnered with us, offering to digitize records and provide safe storage for artifacts that might otherwise vanish into attics or pawnshops. I watched other women's faces light up when they discovered the value not in gold, but in legacy of what they'd inherited. Mariah became the foundation's director of outreach. Her passion was contagious, and her ability to turn ideas into action kept everything running smoothly. Sometimes, late at night after events, we'd sit in my grandmother's old kitchen, drinking coffee and laughing about how far things had come. "You realize," she said once, "this all started because people made fun of your ring." I smiled. And look where that got us. Even Mr. Lenhart, who'd always preferred his quiet life among dusty antiques, began lecturing at universities, sharing how a single forgotten piece could rewrite history. He refused payment for his role, saying the real reward was seeing the right story told the right way. Every so often, letters arrived from strangers who'd seen the exhibit. Some shared their own family mysteries, others just thanked me for inspiring them to dig deeper into their roots. One letter in particular stayed with me. It was from a woman in France who'd visited the museum when the exhibit traveled to Paris. She claimed to be descended from one of Duchess Amara's handmaidens and included a photo of a pendant passed down through her family, a design that mirrored the engraving on my grandmother's ring. Her message ended with, "Perhaps our ancestors protected the same secret together." Reading it made me cry. It reminded me that history isn't just written in books, it's lived through people, through the objects they love, through the stories they leave behind. One afternoon, after a long day of meetings, I came home to find a small package waiting on my doorstep. Inside was a note from the museum curator and a delicate velvet pouch. The ring had returned from its tour. I wasn't expecting to feel such a rush of emotion, but when I lifted it from the pouch, tears filled my eyes. The sapphire caught the sunset streaming through the window, scattering light across the walls like pieces of memory. I slipped it onto my finger, the way my grandmother used to wear it. It didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like a heartbeat, a continuation of something greater than me. That evening, I walked through the garden she'd planted decades ago. The air was cool, the lilacs just beginning to bloom. I thought about everything that had happened, the humiliation, the danger, the heartbreak, and how it had all led here. I thought about Damon, wherever he was, and silently hoped he'd found peace too. Some lessons I'd learned are born from pain. Mariah joined me outside, her coffee steaming in her hands. "You know," she said, watching the light dance off the ring, "you could have sold that for millions. Instead, you turned it into something priceless." I smiled. It was never about money. It was about remembering who we are and making sure no one forgets. We sat together in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. The world felt still, as if even the earth was listening. I raised my hand slightly, letting the last rays of sunlight hit the sapphire. It glowed, soft and blue, like the sky after a storm. "I think she'd be proud of you," Mariah said softly. I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "I hope so." When night finally settled and the first stars appeared, I whispered to the quiet garden, "You were right, Grandma. The ring really did protect me." I slipped the ring off and placed it in its small case on the windowsill, where moonlight could touch it. Not as a possession, but as a reminder of love, of resilience, of legacy. Because sometimes, the things the world mocks are the very things that end up saving us. And as the ring's sapphire shimmered softly under the moon, I realized that my grandmother's story and mine would live on, not as tragedy, but as proof that even the smallest heirloom can carry the strength of generations.